Hey everyone, Eric Hayden here today. Not in the garden. It's mid-December and there's not a lot going out in the garden. Probably like yours, either no blooms or just a few as we head toward the colder winter months. So today I wanted to take a step back and talk about what we can do during the winter, and that is buy more roses. So today's video is going to go over my top 2 vendors. There's some specific reason for these, not only the climate I live in, but just what I've been accustomed to getting in the mail. The next 2 vendors I'm going to talk about by far and away I think are the best. With that said, I'm going to cover some other vendors that I have had luck with. I just don't tend to order from them as much. Perhaps they have a different rootstock than I need, or the plants have just not arrived as good as the top 2 vendors I'm going to talk about. Before we get to that, since we are mixing some things up, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel below. It's Rosie Forecast. And if you're on Instagram, you can find some pictures and videos there as well. In the comments below, let me know what you want to hear about this winter. I already plan on doing a top 5 or top 10 video of my favorite hybrid teas. You can probably already guess that Gemini and Veterans Honor and a few others are going to be in there because I talk about them so much. But comment below, what more do you want to hear from? Would you be interested in a Q&A session? Would you be interested in a live stream presentation? We've done some on how to build a rose garden. We've done some on spraying and microclimates. We've done some on a fertilization program. We can certainly do those again. So while there's not a lot going on in the garden itself, I want to do more videos like this as we head through the winter months. So now we'll get to it. Again, my top 2 favorite vendors. I'll go over why that is, where you can get some of these roses. And the whole point of this video is really to go over where I get a lot of the roses for the garden, because sometimes I get the question, I'll talk about a particular rose and folks will ask, hey Eric, where can I get that? And that's what I'm going to cover today and why I think some of these vendors are fantastic. So my all-time favorite vendor for bare root roses by far is Palentine Roses. This video is not sponsored. It was made December 10th, 2021. I've had a lot of luck with Palentine Roses going back to my time in New York State. This is a company out of Southern Ontario by Toronto. Visited the nursery in 2014. I was very impressed with the fact that they do sustainable growing their crop. And what I mean by that is they have these roses, they bud them in the field, they graft them, they grow them for about 1.5 to 2 years, and then when that field is done, they allow it to sit and replenish. And they're very environmentally friendly as a business. So I do appreciate that. The other thing I appreciate, and this is what you're going to notice, you cannot beat what you get from them in terms of a bare root. You just cannot beat it. When you order these roses, they are grafted onto multiflora rootstock, and the canes are very, very healthy, and the root system is extensive. And what I mean by that is when you get a mail order rose, the canes have to be trimmed down some, the roots may be trimmed a little bit so that they can fit in a box to ship to you. Some of the other companies I've gotten roses from, none of them have died. None of them have been in really rough shape, but they come with short little canes and very short root systems. You can put that in your garden and they do okay. If you put a rose that has a really good root system with it and healthy canes, you're going to get a really good start. And I really want to stress that for new rose growers. A lot of people think roses are hard to grow. They do need consistent care. But what I think is happening is people buy roses at the big box stores or they get them mail order and they just don't have much of a root system. And when you combine that with perhaps putting them in soil that's not been amended properly or cared for, you get failure. So I want you to start off with a good rose, and you will certainly get that from Palentine. And again, you order from Palentine, you'll see exactly what I mean in terms of the root systems. Huge, really, really good. So they've got all types of roses. I primarily focus on hybrid teas on the website. That would be my only downside. They're getting more toward environmentally friendly roses, which is good, but they don't have the exhibition roses that they did a couple years ago. You know, things like, you know, just different roses they've had through the years. They don't have as much as they used to, but they have replaced those with some English roses and some roses that have more sustainability. But you'll notice as I scroll through this list, they do have quite a selection. And they do have some hybrid tea ones that can be used for rose shows. And that's primarily what I'm growing for. I want to grow tall, long stem roses that have pointy centers and hold well in a vase. So Crescendo is certainly one I've highlighted in my garden. Double Delight, cannot beat that for color and also fragrance. That is a very, very nice one. I have that as well. In addition, Folklore, a beautiful orange rose. And then Gemini. When I do the top 3, 5, or 10 video, whatever I decide on, Gemini will certainly be in that. If you go with Gemini and a Folklore, and they also have a Lena on here, you just can't go wrong. And again, I cannot stress enough, the root system on these is the best. So they are going to be selling these roses starting Monday, December 13th. You'll see on the website that it's closed for ordering now. The reason why it's closed is their prior opening day, I think, was the 7th. They had so many people hitting that website, they had some issues, growing pains. This is because they are one of the premier bare root sites on the web. So if you're looking for high quality, I think you have to order them at least in groups of at least 3 is the minimum order. And then shipping is pretty similar to other companies as well. They've got Moonstone. So again, they don't have a Let Freedom Ring. I didn't see Veterans Honor. They don't have all of the top exhibition roses, but Crescendo, Gemini, and Moonstone, those 3, if you grab those, you cannot go wrong at all. So really, really good stuff. Another good one that I'll cover, Peyadus, it says here, but it's actually a Lena in our country. This is a brilliant yellow rose. I'm growing this in the garden now. So Palentine Roses, get yourself a Gemini, a Moonstone, an Alina, which Peyadus on this website, Crescendo. Those are all good ones to grow for sure. And again, the thing that, the price is comparable, the shipping is comparable. The 2 things that stand out, I mentioned number 1, the root system. You're just going to be blown away, especially if you've ordered from other companies. Not to dismay them, I want to talk the positive of Palentine. Just huge, huge roots that you'll be getting in the mail, and that will get you off to a good start. And the other thing they do really well is certainly customer service, top notch. I know they're having some growing pains with so many people ordering from them, and that's really a testament to how quality of plant you're going to get in the mail. So that's a larger company. That is one that I highly recommend. It's grown on multiflora rootstock, really can grow across the country, and it is probably favored on the northern climates for sure. It can take some cold weather. My second favorite vendor, now this is a total opposite. This is a specialty vendor. This is Wisconsin Roses, Steve Singer. You're not going to find a lot of roses on this website, but what you're going to find are unique, specialized exhibition roses. For example, a Fern. You're not going to find that on Palentine's website, or Reagan's website, or Jackson and Perkins, or Witherspoon, or Weeks. You're not going to find some of these roses, and these are special roses, some of which have been hybridized by local hybridizers, and they are all top exhibition roses, or they are up and coming roses. And what I mean by an exhibition rose, again, that's what I'm growing for. I'm growing for the pointy center, petals that hold for a long, long time. I'm trying to win rose shows. Even if I don't win a rose show, if you got a rose that's going to last a long time, it also makes a great cut flower. So that's what I mean by an exhibition rose. And Wisconsin Roses specializes in that. The sales went up over a month ago, so you can see some are sold out, but they still have some good ones. Affirm is certainly a good one. Another one I would recommend is certainly Hot Princess. I've shown that in the garden. It is a florist rose. So those are usually bred for indoor climates, in a greenhouse in Ecuador, to grow well there. They typically don't do well in the garden. That is not the case with Hot Princess. In my parents' garden, in my garden, it is one of the tallest, if not the tallest and best growing roses I have. Beautiful pink. It looks just like this on the left. A really, really nice rose. And another good one I have done some videos on, Louise Estes. I mean, you just cannot beat the vibrant color with that. Very, very nice. Marlin's Day is a good one maybe to get on next year. It's sold out. Steve updates these lists usually October each year. If you email him now or even the spring, he'll graph new ones next year. You'll just have to be patient. The other thing you can do, these are the ones he has a lot of, but there's a list of smaller numbers, and that's where you can find some other ones. Claire Elise, I've certainly talked about If you follow me on Instagram, that is the rose I've got on my main page for that. Before I move on, the one thing I do have to say is you are getting a maiden rose. And what is a maiden rose? I think it's just the coolest thing. Unlike Palentine or Witherspoon or Reagan, Edmonds, those are grafted roses that are 1.5 to 2 years old. A maiden rose, you're really just paying for this bud eye grafted onto the rootstock. So this is what it looks like when you get it. Down below is the rootstock. In this case, it's multiflora. It's not an extensive root system like Palentine yet, because just think of it like a baby rose. So that's not an issue, but still, it's very, very healthy. Here's the graft of what you want. So let's say this is Hot Princess, and this is the multiflora plant above it. So what you'll do is this little bud eye in some cases is pushing out just a little bit. And you're going to actually cut above that bud eye right where he's got this pencil. And then after you do that, there's nothing else on this rootstock except your bud eye. So that's what's going to continue to grow. So eventually that will push out. In some cases it's pushing out when you get it. So you are paying for this bud eye grafted on the multiflora rootstock. Then after 5 to 7 weeks, sometimes a month, you'll get the first maiden cane and bloom. And slowly, over the course of a couple months, it will grow into a large grade 1 rose. On Steve's website, he clearly says this. Usually, it's a full year, or it's usually by the fall that it'll be equivalent of like a grade 1 rose that you get in the mail. Here are some advantages. These are huge advantages. Any company you order from, no matter how well they ship it or package it, as good as Palentine is, still my favorite, they still have to trim the canes and the roots to ship it to you. They still have to dig it up. They still have to harvest it. So there is going to be some damage, albeit even if it's small, some transplant shock to the rose itself. Not a huge difference. But the roses you get from Steve, they're little bud eyes grafted onto a rootstock. So when I get them, I pot them up into a 2-gallon container. After about 2 months, they're root bound. And if they're really doing well, I'll put them in the garden. Sometimes I transfer them to a 5-gallon container, let them get a little bit bigger. All I'm doing is really getting that root system going. So when I put that in the ground about midsummer, it is well established and it's ready to hit the ground running. So if you have patience, if you can wait a year, usually that fall, and certainly by that next spring, that's when they're really taking off, I can't recommend them enough. More evidence, 2015, I ordered Cajun Moon from Steve in the spring. Did the same thing again, planted it in a 2-gallon container, let it get root bound, probably by late June, mid-July, planted it into the ground. September 2015, Syracuse had a fall national rose show, ARS sponsored. I got first, second, and third, but the second place rose, King, was my Cajun Moon, received from Steve that spring. So again, you got to be patient. You're not going to put it in the ground right away and it's going to do great. Baby it, pot it up, get it going. And I think the coolest thing about it is it's neat seeing it from the process of getting it like this, and then after making the cut and a couple weeks later seeing it like this and then into a full rose. I'll try to put a link down below to the maiden process because I have certainly shown some videos on that. So if you're new to my website, I want you to realize that we've got some really good stuff on there in terms of past videos. I want to make sure you don't miss it. So if you're just joining us, again, the top 2 rose vendors that I went over today, Palentine Roses, #1 because of what you get in the mail. Extensive root system, great customer service, can be limited on some of the exhibition hybrid teas. Steve Singer, great specialty shop, not a huge selection, but if there's some roses that you want that you've heard me talk about, they're probably on that website as well. The next couple I'm going to go through a little quicker. They are certainly good vendors as well. There's some reasons I don't order as frequently from them, not because I got a bad rose, but they just don't tend to have the extensive root system that Palentine does, or they don't have the specialty roses like Wisconsin roses. So this is Witherspoon roses. I got to give them some love because they're out of my home state here this year in North Carolina, Charlotte and Raleigh. They've got shops. They do a lot of classes. They do maintenance. They maintain gardens, so they have that service. But they also sell roses. These are Weeks roses. You can get these at your local nurseries, and I defaulted to the top sellers. So they got a wider variety than that you'll have on Palentine. So that's certainly an advantage of some of the vendors I'm talking coming up. So your Double Delight, your Moonstone, Fragrant Cloud. It's a newer one, not super new, but I can't speak more highly enough than Pope John Paul II. I got this from Witherspoon 2 years ago. All of these are grafted on Dr. Huey. And we should talk briefly a little bit about rootstocks. The Palentine and Steve Singer is on Multiflora. That is a fairly popular rootstock to be grafted on, but most of the larger companies, the one I just mentioned, Witherspoon, which gets its roses from Weeks, Reagan Nursery, Edmonds, a lot of those are grafted on Dr. Huey. It can grow across most of the country, and it just does well out in California where a lot of these are grafted. So that's why I want to mention Dr. Huey. Again, it's just something to kind of keep in mind. The northern climates do a little bit better with Multiflora, but you can get away with either. But back to Pope John Paul II, beautiful white, clean rose, fragrant, Veterans Honor. You know I've talked about that. Marilyn Monroe. St. Patrick is a gorgeous yellow. I've got Secret. That's got nice form and also is fragrant as well. So the selection on something like a Witherspoon is going to be really good. Another example of that is Reagan roses. They started their ordering in end of September, so some of these are sold out, but their variety is what is really good. So you can certainly do the hybrid teas, but they've got David Austin's, the ground cover roses, climbing roses. So these larger vendors, the advantage with them is variety, variety, variety. The downside is you're going to get a great plant. The canes are going to tend, from my experience, are going to tend to be shorter when they come into mail. That's not as big of a deal. My bigger issue is that the root system is not as extensive. Canes can always grow, but you want to start with good roots. But again, the variety is what is going to be an advantage on something like a Reagan or Witherspoon, usually grafted on Dr. Huey. Occasionally you'll see some of them say own root. That's not a bad thing, but that is not a grafted rose. So it might be a little slower growing, but for northern climates it can be better, a little more winter hardy because you're not worried about a rootstock living. This is Weeks. The only reason why I show Weeks is you can't order Weeks directly online. So you might say, well, Eric, why are you showing us this? I'm showing you this because you're going to see this logo if you shop locally. And this is also what your roses are coming from for Witherspoon. So Weeks is a wholesaler that sells to local nurseries and other entities. So if you see this, they have beautiful cards, little placards on the card with telling you what the name is, how it grows, and things like that. So they do a great job with that. And these are some of the roses they offer. Again, usually through local vendors. Alina, again, called Payadus on Palentine's website. That's a brilliant yellow. But what I've shown you already, Palentine, Reagan, Witherspoon, you can get your 3 or 4 roses that I think are just hits. Things like Double Delight, Alina, Veterans Honor, Gemini, all really, really good roses, highly recommended. Before I move on to the last vendor, all of the vendors prior to what I'm about to talk about are on Dr. Huey or Multiflora, can grow across the whole country. The last vendor I'm going to mention is a specialty rose company, and I saved this for the end because it's kind of unique to the warmer climates. This, of course, is K&M Roses. Excellent vendor. Probably the widest selection, not probably, the widest selection for sure of all things exhibition roses. So think about Steve Singer times a million. So Steve has some unique roses, ones that you can't get in a lot of places. Mr. Mills, James Mills down in Mississippi, has roses grafted onto Fortuniana, and he's just got everything you need. The only downside, and it's not a downside if you live down south, his roses are grafted on Fortuniana. And if you don't know what that is, it's a southern rootstock that was developed in Florida. and it's resistant to nematodes. It does really, really well in sandy soil. You don't have to have sandy soil for it to grow, but as you get farther north, it's a little more winter tender. So even here in North Carolina, I can occasionally get into the teens, and I've lost a couple of these if they were newer, if I just got them from Mr. Mills and they weren't established. However, once they get established, they are pretty hardy. The exception, again, is if you live north of the Mid-Atlantic or Mid-Atlantic North, you probably don't want to order these. Like I would not order these if I lived in Wisconsin or upstate New York because they're likely not to survive the winter. So that's why I put it at the end, not because of quality, but more the uniqueness of the rootstock. With that said, where K&M excels, and I was super jealous when I was up north because I said, man, I wish I could order from Mr. Mills, but I just can't because I live in a cold climate. This is why I want to order or wanted to order from Mr. Mills. I'd say the majority of my garden is grafted on Fortuniana. And you can see he's got all the local or smaller hybridizers as well as some of the big ones like Cordis as well. Just really good stuff. And you've heard me mention John Smith before, so his whole collection is there. Baby's Blush is a beautiful pink. Claire Elise, again, is on my Instagram page. Randy Scott, probably the best white rose out there. Really, really good stuff. And then Sunny Sundays, I know a lot of you like that one as well. So this is where I get the majority of my roses. Twofold. Number one, I live in a 100% sand climate, and it's warm enough for Fortuniana. And number two, this selection. This is Fred Wright. He's out of North Carolina. The one that I have, or two that I have from him, Eddie Edwards is a good one. And then Mr. Caleb, I know you've seen me talk about that, a beautiful red rose. So K&M roses, I encourage you to give them a try if you haven't, if you live in a warm enough climate. Really, really good stuff. And they do have other ones. And what I mean by that is they've got the new ones from the local hybridizers, but they've got Black Magic, Florist Rose. They've got, there's Cajun Moon, Crescendo. They're going to have Veterans Honor. They're going to have Moonstone. Here's Dolly Parton. Dublin. So their selection just can't be beat. By far, that is the best selection out there, especially when you're talking about hybrid tea roses that do well in the garden. One more thing I want to mention. Let's see if I can find this. He's got a Facebook page as well. Let's see if he goes into this. So he goes into what the Fortuniana rootstock is. I don't see a picture of this, but what I wanted to talk about was when you get these roses in the mail. I don't see any pictures, so I'll just go back to me. When you get these roses in the mail, they will not be bare root, so you might pay a little bit more in terms of shipping and packaging. So Palentine, Witherspoon, even Wisconsin roses, that's a little grafted rose onto a rootstock, a maiden rose. They're all going to be bare root roses. They're not going to have soil. They're going to be packaged small and shipped to you. Mr. Mills ships the Fortuniana grafted roses usually in 2-gallon pots, occasionally 1-gallon pots. So you're shipping the soil, you're shipping a container, so it's heavier. So it's going to cost a little bit more money, and he has really good packaging. He's got it down to a pack. He's got cardboard to keep them separated because you usually order in batches of 2 to save on shipping costs. So you're going to be paying more. You know, the roses are comparable to Palentine and others in that mid-20s to near $30 range for just the rose. But then you're going to be paying, I think it's $5 more a carton, and you're certainly paying more for the freight via UPS because it's heavier. The reason for that is Fortuniana doesn't transport well as a bare root rose, that's why it's like that. The advantage is you have a pretty established rose. Some of them really take off quick. I know he usually says after a year is where they really leap out of the ground. So that's it. I know it was a long video. I'm going to try to put timestamps in there. If you made it to the end, congratulations. Again, Palentine's my favorite because of the root system and customer service. I just wish they had more hybrid tea roses of exhibition. They certainly did that years ago, but I understand it's a hard business to sell roses that you need to spray all the time, for sure. Wisconsin Roses is great, especially with regards to specialty roses. I talked about the larger ones. I showed you Weeks, Reagan, showed you Witherspoon. Didn't put Edmonds. I didn't put everybody on there, but they're certainly there. And if you live far enough south, you can talk to Mr. Mills about that. The farther south you live, the better the Fortuniana does. Great plants. A little more pricey because of the shipping, so you certainly have to watch out for that as well. So that's it. Let me know what you think. This is something different than me being out in the garden. It takes a little longer to set up on the computer. As always, subscribe to the channel, Rosie Forecast. I appreciate it. And the best compliment you can give us is by leaving a comment and by sharing your rose knowledge in the comments and letting us know what you want to hear from in the future. Do you want that Q&A session? Do you want a live stream? What would you like to hear this winter as we're all waiting for spring to arrive and our roses to be back in bloom? Have a great day, everyone, and I appreciate you watching.